Thank you so much for coming to our first panel. This is on AI and faculty development. I'm Lawrence Cappello. I'm an associate professor of history at the University of Alabama. I'm also co-director of its AI Teaching Enhancement Initiative. We have a very robust set of speakers today. In no particular order, Dr. Katherine Chiou is an assistant professor of anthropology at the University of Alabama, co-directs UA's Artificial Intelligence Teaching Enhancement Initiative and the Coalition for Innovating Privacy, Ethics, Humanities, and Rights in AI, CIPHER AI. In addition to her work in the field of archaeology, she conducts research on ethics education, including NSF-funded research on case study-based training to kind of improve ethical decision-making in STEM. Dr. Chiou also organizes Ethics Bowls, which are a key ethics training intervention for undergraduate and graduate students. She also advises on ethical principles and issues for several major professional organizations. Dr. Lindsay Ducopoulos. Perfect. My mother certainly thinks so. Serves as an associate. Serves as an associate director for educational development in the Vigio Center here at Auburn University. She leads the Vigio Teaching Unit, which offers faculty professional development and teaching and learning upskilling, including the Teaching with AI course for faculty, staff, and GTAs across campus. Ms. Melissa Pickett is Director of Distance Education at Trenholm State Community College in Montgomery, Alabama. Melissa has been with Trenholm for 26 years, most of which she served as Computer Information Systems Instructor Division Chair. In her current role, she manages the college's LMS, Canvas, and provides training for the faculty and students. Dr. Amy Chatham serves as Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at UAB. Over the last year, she has conceptualized and offered the Using AI in the Classroom workshop series, in addition to providing faculty development for UAB faculty members in the area of teaching effectiveness and evaluation. This is great. Now, to start us off, we can keep it kind of informal. Would you mind just briefly explaining in 2 or 3 minutes some of the initiatives your institutions are currently pursuing, particularly to upskill faculty on AI and AI usage in the classroom?
I guess I'll get us started. So with us, Alabama Community College System, we partner with Auburn University in one of their online courses, Teaching with AI. And it's just been a great experience for our college system as a whole, because this allowed us to not only communicate with each other within our current institution, but also within our system as a whole. And this allowed us to be able to all go through AI and learn about it more all together. So it's been a good experience for us.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Katherine Chiou. Along with Lawrence Cappello, I co-direct the AI Teaching Enhancement Initiative at the University of Alabama. It may be useful just to give you all a sense of like where we're coming from now, a couple of years after the deployment of ChatGPT. Lawrence and I are educators first and foremost. The interesting thing about the way in which we developed our initiative was essentially that, we're both at that time junior professors dealing with essentially, a sudden technological revolution in our minds. We were familiar with AI to a certain extent, but generative AI, of course, is a whole different kind of beast, and immediately its impact on education and learning and the experience that students and educators are having in the classroom was clear. And so in wanting to, first of all, be able to be proactive and figure out how to tackle this issue, particularly from our own vantage point as professors in the classroom, we pulled together some resources. We went to all these different kinds of trainings. We got funding to go and speak to many different institutions, both faculty, administrators, people design and deployment side, different kinds of institutions in terms of not only R1 institutions like ours, but also community colleges, HBCUs, tribal colleges, to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the landscape and how AI is impacting what we learn differentially. In the course of the last 2 years, we've been doing, well, first of all, we piloted a series of workshops for some of our professors in the College of Arts and Sciences, and we're working closely with Associate Dean Albert Pianchi on that. And we just saw, again, like, of course, everybody dealing with this issue had some fear, had some anxieties about what it meant to be living in an AI-enabled age, what it means for students, what learning looks like, what teaching should feel like, what we should be preparing our students for. So many questions and anxieties, and to a certain extent also resistance to conforming to what is expected of us in terms of integrating AI technologies. And really what we've seen is the sort of reinvigoration in a way through our workshops of a love of learning and remembering what it's like to be educators. I know for many years, many of my peers have felt that they're on the front lines of basically a learning apocalypse in a way, where we're dealing with students that are increasingly disengaged, engaged with material much differently. They're not reading. I've had students walk in basically with not complete literacy as well. And so then these challenges, of course, were just exacerbated by generative AI and the potential for generative AI to like offload some of that learning to basically technology. And so in experimenting and trying to figure out how to teach faculty, we have just basically found out that faculty want to like their jobs, right? They want to love learning, they want to love teaching. And in doing this, not only have we been able to kind of get people to understand what AI is, what some of its promises and perils are, but really that it's forcing us all at this very particular moment to revisit what it means to learn, how learning is done, to figure out what our outcomes are, figure out how to get to them. And so it's also just a wonderful opportunity to kind of reassess things all together, and an opportunity to branch out as well into ultimately to new kinds of people.
So here at Auburn in January 2023, we got a call from the history department. It's the homework about this. What are we going to do about this? All of our essays, all of our, just kind of what you all, I'm sure, have experienced in some form in your own classes or institutions. Excuse me. So we quickly got together as a center and we thought about, we had just come out of the pandemic where we had been on call and creating resources and workshops. One of the things we found is that it worked a lot better if we had existing support where people could come together and really collaborate asynchronously. So we created a course, a Canvas course for Auburn University faculty, and it was built by many people in this room. If you helped with that course in any way, raise your hand here. It's very much a team effort. Jenny, you're helping on it now. You can raise your hand too. She's our AI fellow now in the Big U Center. So we brought together all these different professors and experts on different disciplinary lenses. We said we don't know what the AI is. There's no research, there's no precedent for this, but we do know what good teaching is. And what we know is this is a situational factor that highly impacts assessments. So we really doubled down on thinking about if we can't trust that the products of learning are generated in the student's head, what then do we assess? And so a lot of the focus of the course and the training has been rethinking the products of learning and focusing more on the process of learning. And a lot of times you have to get the product before the student can kind of talk through their process. So kind of thinking about different ways to manage that aspect of it. But that's really where our focus started. And then from there, that course kind of took off. The SEC licensed it for all the institutions in the SEC. And now we have the community college system of Alabama. We have a bunch of different folks from across. I think we have, 100 institutions now? It's 10,000. Excuse me, 10,000 faculty. Yeah, it really grew. It's become a whole unit within our teaching unit and within the Big EO Center with a lot of folks contributing to it. But I think the thing that is important to me now, and it was so refreshing to hear that different conversation coming out in the keynote today, not just how do we prompt, how do we do the tech, but rather what are the ethical considerations we need to start thinking about as a community? And really in terms of the future of higher education, this is huge in its impacts on assessment, on our accreditation, on the certifications we give, and really thinking through communally in moments like this is where we're kind of focusing. And our big push now, Jenny over here, our professor of music, is our AI fellow. We've started going around to departments because we are finding there is the frontline adopters. You all have seen that technology adoption curve, I'm sure, or bunch of people do it early, and then you get to the bigger curve. We're starting to go up that curve, and we're finding again and again, we go into departments and share out AI, and they haven't really, they're not ready yet. You know, that we know it exists. We're getting some short-term strategies to mitigate it. But we're starting to see a little bit more aptitude and curiosity from our faculty. So like you're saying, that kind of joy of discovery is starting to come out a little bit more. So we're excited about that.
All right. Okay, going last, right? So you've said everything. No, I'm Amy Chatham, and I'm from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And about a year ago, our Department of English, they were the first that decided to tackle this. They were really, really anxious about the fact would anybody ever write their own essay ever again. So they had a working group during the summer, and they sat down and thought about how AI could be used. And it was really amazing. You were talking about early adopters, and some of ours were our English faculty. To get out to the other 13 schools at UAB, beyond College of Arts and Sciences, we started going on the road, very much like you've heard about here, and going and talking in these joint faculty meetings to get in front of our clinical faculty, to get in front of our humanities faculty, our STEM faculty, and first of all, just to talk to them about each faculty member having some academic freedom to determine whether or not they were going to allow any use of AI in their classroom at all. And that was a really big question, right? Like we don't even know how to use it ourselves. How are we going to teach other people to use it? And one of the first things I did in the CTL was I started talking to students, and they were ahead of us. All the research shows us that they are using it at a higher rate than faculty are using it. But yet we're being called upon to determine how they're going to be using it upon graduation in their fields, in their graduate studies. So we've got to figure out how to catch up. And so we have spent a lot of time, first of all, working with faculty to determine where they stand on the use of AI and whether or not it's appropriate for their course, whether or not they're comfortable with it being used in their course, how their students are going to be asked to use it upon graduation. So that's one of the first things. And then create syllabus statements to that effect, and have conversations with your students about all of this in a fully transparent manner. And that was our first big push. After that, we created the Using AI in the Classroom workshop series. So at our CTL, we offer teaching effectiveness workshops, global awareness. We partner with DSS to get all of their information out. Our student counseling services, they offer workshops. So great place to come get information. So we just wondered if people would come. But can I tell you, they came because, you know, when you first hear about prompt engineering, you're like, what is that? And how do I teach it? And how do I do it? UAB at our institution, we do have Copilot available for every student, staff member, and faculty member, which is really, really nice now. Students are still using ChatGPT, though. They're not using Copilot. But to really teach our faculty what they need to know, we have the workshop series. And so they are coming, and we start with Intro to AI, what is a large learning model, you know, and then we work from there to prompt generation and redesigning courses and assignments. So it's been an interesting ride. A lot of our faculty come and they're like, we kind of feel like you're encouraging us to use it. And I'm like, yes, I am, because it's here, it's coming. Our faculty are really burnt out post-COVID, right? That whole going online and then that kind of hybrid era coming back. So they're feeling like you're asking me to do something new. So the question always becomes, can't you just give me a turn it in for AI so I just know? And we know that those don't work. Those of us who have investigated those turn it in type models to detect it, they're better than they were. It used to be like a 30% false positive rate, and they got it down to about 8%. But we don't want to be accusing students of cheating. Our students are fearful that if they use AI in any capacity, Grammarly even, they're going to be accused of cheating. So we've got a heavy lift. And at UAB, certainly we're bound and determined to continue to get faculty what they need. We do workshops in the CTL, but then we also go to faculty, and then we even work with faculty one-on-one as needed. So I'll stop there.
It's been an interesting year. I mean, ChatGPT drops November 2022, but even over the last 12 months, all of us seem to be talking about this like 5 stages of grief process, where in 2022, everyone was like, oh, hell no, right? Like, you know, it's so much, the level of resistance was insane. This is the death of creativity, the death of expertise, commodification. And one thing I found when piloting our workshops, which we started at a college level, and we were shocked by the level of enthusiasm. The workshops filled very quickly. We now work at the university-wide level with UA's Teaching Academy. Dr. Tyler Roberts is representing him here today, Dr. Claire Major as well. But we were also, again, shocked that we put out a call for a certain amount of seats, and within the first day, there were 3 times the amount of like seats that we actually had. So we know faculty enthusiasm is there. There's less doom and gloom in the conversation. Still, resistance is considerable. And I'm curious, you've talked a lot about the challenges you face when dealing with faculty. Are there any particular misconceptions you found are increasingly common across disciplines that people who are trying to entice faculty to start incorporating these tools into the classroom are frequently going to encounter, and maybe some strategies about how you've neutralized that or ameliorated that? We don't need to go in order. If anybody wants to talk by all means.
Well, I'll go ahead. With our faculty, I think, you know, fear of unknown, you know, what is it, how is it going to, you know, impact our classes? I think that was a big thing. So there were many faculty that, you know, was just totally against it. And I think a lot of that was because, you know, it was how is it going to, you know, affect me and my classes and my students. And as it was mentioned, you know, students already know about it, so I've got to play catch up. So I think it was just that not knowing was a big thing. And faculty, the more they got to, you know, work with and learn about it, I think that helped a lot. So I have to definitely shout out to everyone who took part in creating that teaching with AI course, because it really helped our faculty a great deal.
I'll just add that one interesting thread we've seen throughout, I guess, even the last 2 years is sort of the concept of stigma, which we as anthropologists love to study. But this notion that like there are values attached to AI, and that if you engage with it, you are by nature not a good person, right? And I think at the society we are trying to navigate those waters and understand, you know, the tool itself. And as the keynote speaker was talking about, like what the ethical sort of guardrails should be, and like whether we should focus on the consequences and the outcomes, or you know, all these kinds of things. So of course, like these are incredibly important in ethics plays part and parcel of, you know, also our workshops as well. But I like to remind, you know, the faculty and students too, to a certain extent, that like we are all navigating these uncertain waters together. And it became clear through our visits to not only our SEC peer institutions, but also like smaller rural institutions that aren't as well resourced, that like nobody has the answers, right? Talking from administrators leading these large institutions all the way to faculty on the front lines, teaching the students, you know, we're all figuring out things as we go, as like theology, like seat in your pants. And you know, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And so I like to tell people that, like, okay, like, you know, something that, you know, one of my professors in grad school was like to say, like, be comfortable with just saying, like, I don't know, right? The idea is to maintain an environment of transparency. I like to tell students, you know, this is what I do know, this is what I've been looking into and researching for the last couple of years. I don't have the answers as to like what is the outcome. I don't know what the world is going to look like that you're going to walk into, but I think, you know, given what we're seeing so far, that you're going to have to become familiar with this technology, regardless of how you feel about it. It's the same thing for faculty, right? You can have moral qualms about AI, but you're going to have to redesign your courses to build around it, whether or not you agree with it or not. And I think, like, you know, especially in the last couple of years, like we've seen a high degree of distrust emerge between faculty and students. And I think naturally because of not only like changing nature of like the generations, but also like, you know, just faculty are fatigued, as we've mentioned several times, and feeling like it's just an onslaught of things coming at them, especially in the post-pandemic environment, that like, you know, the sort of initial emphasis on student misconduct was, I think, not particularly the right approach. And granted, of course, AI brings up a lot of issues about academic integrity, and those are important. But really, I think we're missing the forest from the trees, or whatever the saying is, right? At the end of the day, like, we're about teaching and learning, and impacting these students these crucial couple of years in their development prior to them going out and actually having to be in the real world and dealing with real world consequences. It's incredibly important. And so I think the emphasis should again be on teaching and what it is that we need to do to adapt to changing times to make sure that our students are getting education that is preparing them for an uncertain and malleable future. So a lot of what we do in terms of trying to formulate some kind of intervention towards that faculty kind of misgivings about AI is like, just be clear with your students. Like, I don't know what necessarily is going on. I'm engaging with this technology just as you're engaging with this technology. So let's do it together. Let's be open about it. Let's talk about, how we might, for example, practice good citational practices, right? Which again, so there's some guidance out there right now, but it's not necessarily formalized. Let's think about potential applications, right? I like so my students, okay, I had this idea just yesterday thinking about AI, and I'd like to practice it all together with you guys, and let's see how it goes, right? It could be a complete failure, or it could be something wonderful, and we iterate from there. So treat it as like a co-learning environment where the students, again, are navigating this at the same time as you are. Just like us, they're also dealing with stigma. So like I have a lot of students that have more sort of oppositions to AI, and we're like, oh, I've been told that if I even touch it, I'm cheating, right? Or I have students that have philosophical issues with AI and thinking about it, it's not human, and I want to maintain myself. And I think like if I create with AI, it's no longer me, right? And so from a sort of egocentric perspective, like I didn't do this, right? And so we like to assume that the students are just out to get us. In reality, I feel very badly for them. I think they're living in very tumultuous times and having to navigate, again, uncertain waters, and there's no sort of certainty about what it is they're going to be ending up doing. But increasingly, the research is showing us that, like, businesses are wanting AI competencies. The students, who, obviously are part of the demand, are asking for AI guidance as well as training. 70%, I think, according to the latest poll. And so it's a unique opportunity for us to step up and offer that. And like the keynote speaker said, like to basically be in the driver's seat and help develop the proper training and the proper education about how to do this ethically and responsibly in order to maintain those like societal impacts that we all want.
Got the mic, I'll go next. That's fine. All right. So I think the biggest concern that I keep hearing from faculty is how am I going to know that they're learning what I need them to learn? Right? If AI can do my assignments, if AI could feasibly pass my class, how do I know? Right? And at first it was like, are we all going back to blue books? Remember those moments, right? When it's like, oh my God, we can't let them do anything on their own anymore because we won't know that it's them. So some of the best really early research that I've seen. There's a group out of the University of Surrey. It's a business school. Have you all seen this, where they have decided to flip Bloom's taxonomy on its head? So instead of working up to where we're trying to get students to create, right, from that understanding and remembering up to creation, if AI can create, and it can, right? We know that it's being used, right? How many of you use it daily? Here, right? We use it, right? Because it gets us from zero to something really fast. Not a final product, but it gets us something on the page, right? So if it can do that, then we need to then have students work with AI to create something, but then teach them how do they analyze? How do they assess? How do they determine the veracity and the value of what has been created? And so this is one of those cool things when we think about like flipping pedagogy on its head is the way that we've always thought about it, right? Okay, we're going to have them create and do projects and, presentations and their final and capstones and all of these things. But if AI can do those, then how does education need to look different in the classroom? So this is this really cool time for people who aren't exhausted, just really thinking about how can I rethink my course and really use AI as a tool, because they're going to be using it as a tool in the future. So how do we use it that way? And so this is some of the coolest kind of work that we're doing in the CTL is sitting with faculty to go through that premise. How can you flip it? And so I'm seeing really cool things out of our school of nursing in the way that they educate, right? Experiential education. And it's just this great opportunity. I mentioned English earlier. They're doing the same. They are actually having AI write on their behalf. We talk about it being biased, right? We've all heard the conversation about how biased AI is because it's being trained on all this biased information that is the internet. And so one of our, it was a first year English class. She had AI, had students feed some information to themselves to the AI and have it write a biography about it. And one of her students was from Coleman, Alabama, and she put the information, and what AI spit out was the most incredibly horrible, every bad thing you can think about being from rural Alabama, right? And it was all of it, right? And she shared it with the faculty member, and the faculty member was like, well, you don't have to share that with the class. She goes, oh no, I want to share this with the class because you can't teach that lesson, right? You couldn't set that up. It happened. And so then we don't have to teach them about some of these ethical considerations, right? If we're using it and we're open with them, because we're learning, it's hard, right? We're the faculty members, we're supposed to know and teach them things. But if everything's available, right? We heard the scary thing at the end of the keynote about, are we going to do it, or are we going to let for profits do it, right? If AI is available and can teach, and it's being used to teach. I heard from Khan Academies. I mean, it can be used this way. This is an opportunity for us. So faculty really thinking through how can I ensure that the students are learning what I need them to learn. We've got to rethink that. And so this is this opportunity. So as we're teaching faculty about the use of AI and how to use it, the questions need to be asked. Really, how can this tool be used to get me where I want them to go? And so those are the questions that we need to ask. And I don't think anybody has the answer. I'll stop there for right now.
Just two quick things with faculty misconceptions. One that we hear a lot, particularly from our colleagues in the STEM science. Do we have STEM folks here? I see Shaba. There, a lot of times we'll come in and they'll say, well, I tried it. I put in a prompt, it didn't get the answer right. I'm not worried about it. Okay, well, that's a misconception right there, that your first attempt is actually proof of the concept. So getting them to work with it and really to play with it a lot more. So more the strategy that we're taking is exactly that kind of Flip Bloom's model. Play first. There's great AI tools like Suno. Does anybody use that? Where you can generate a pop song based on 200 characters. My kids love it. Adriana's Dream, we have to listen to every day in the car now, that calls out the whole family and the pets and all that. It's a fun thing. So I was doing a keynote for Caden University in New Jersey a few weeks ago, and we pulled that up, and there was a music professor in there. Sorry, Jen. Like, obviously you wouldn't use this to teach music as a discipline, but we invited them, how would you use this in your class? Like, oh, well, we could have, bonus quizzes, or whoever shows up for class every day gets to choose a song or craft a song for their group that becomes the anthem. So there's ways to play with it that bring in a lot of the students' own identity into an artifact that can be quickly shared and elevate kind of their status, but also self-expression. So it's a way to motivate learning beyond the grades. And I think the second point that I wanted to make, or misconception, is that a lot of faculty that we work with say the problem is with the AI for the ethical considerations. But as you drill down, the problem is really about the loss of positional power they're experiencing as leaders of a class in a system where that has always been just the de facto motivator to get students to do work. And when you take that out of the equation, it puts a lot more emphasis on us as teachers to really connect with our students and center them in the design of our teaching, in the design of how it's a lot more work. And it's not work that most of us have been trained to do. So really focusing on how to connect with your students, how to elevate them as knowing more about this technology probably than we do at this point, and using it as that opportunity to play and learn that's one of the ways that we're getting more ground on it.
There's a kind of now becoming tired of saying in the larger AI community that like AI is not going to take your job, right? Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. When we think about the future, there's a lot of studies that are showing student usage of AI is significantly outpacing faculty usage of AI. That it's just younger people are using it more and faculty are using it less. There's also a lot of chatter from the private and public sectors saying that we're either we've reached the point or are rapidly approaching a point where if you have a 4-year college degree, employers are going to expect that you are somewhat conversant with these tools. No one's going to expect a 23-year-old to, have a degree in machine learning, but whether you're a history major, an English major, or a bio major, that you have used these tools in some ways in college to solve a problem, right? Or to help you kind of as an accompaniment toward that. Do you think on the faculty side, particularly for junior faculty coming up, people looking, in these early stages of their career, is it going to be an essential requirement of someone's teaching portfolio as they're approaching those early stages in their career?
Yes, well, that was dramatic. I do believe so.
Let's hear that.
Okay, is that good? Okay.
It's better.
Yeah, I think it's like an innovation in your discipline. If the technology by which you do your research changes, your research has to change. If the technology by which you do your teaching changes, the way you teach needs to change as well. So I think thinking about it that way is helpful.
Yeah, that's really loud. I do agree with you that I do think that there is going to be an expectation that all of us know how to use it. I heard Ruben Blay speak the other day. I don't know if you know who he is. He's at the very cutting edge of AI in healthcare. He's convinced every model for every physician, every clinician, every insurance, it's all going to change with AI. And he said he would not hire anybody who doesn't use AI currently. And I think that as we're building departments in schools, that as junior faculty are coming in, that part of that, like teaching effectiveness and innovation that we all are strive for at our institutions, right? We need to stay current. So I do think that there's going to be an expectation that you be able to demonstrate knowledge of how to use it effectively in the classroom with your students. I mean, it's a tool for us too. I mean, like we all show, we raised our hands, right? You don't have to start with nothing anymore. It makes us, it makes me creative faster, right? When I have to address my faculty senate, right? And I have 10 minutes to give them 3 points, right? It offers me some really nice formatting ideas and a question to start with. It gives me some fun things to start with. And so why would I go back to grinding it out? And so, thank you.
So it's a lapel mic, so if you hold it, it just means that would be at your lapel, it might also be a little bit less.
Anyway, yeah, so it, yes, so I do think that is a long answer to a short question. But I do think that our younger faculty have this opportunity to really get ahead of the game and to be able to demonstrate, ability to take education to a new level. You guys, you're sharing.
Okay, for my own sort of personal perspective, I mean, in terms of thinking about like stick versus carrot, I'm always more of a carrot type of person, but I understand the utility of both. I do think that as institutions, there should be incentives to allow faculty the capacity and the support they need to be able to continually work on their teaching skills, to have the time to invest into learning new technologies, to revisiting their coursework. Obviously, a lot of stuff that everyone, I think, to a certain extent is asking for, and I think that's partially why there's so much resistance. It's just the feeling that everyone's already overwhelmed and at maximum capacity, and then now they're adding on another thing. And so, if there's any way to provide that space for faculty, I think that would definitely be well received. Building it into requirements for like, assistant professors, for example, could be a potential other approach. But I think like what really would help, and if we can just get faculty into the classroom and just show them what the capabilities of this technology are and its ability to kind of offload some of the less desirable tasks that they have to do on a day-to-day basis, just showing them like, hey, you can actually focus on course design because all the other sort of menial labor that you do can now be offloaded to AI. Right, so you can think fundamentally and have the mental capacity to design something that you think is actually going to be effective in the classroom. And what a joy it is to kind of revisit why it is you wanted to teach in the first place. And I think that's a huge incentive. Another thing too is, and I want to address this sort of thing about like, oh, like, well, if AI can suddenly, do all the work that I previously assigned in my classroom and it's doing it pretty well, like how can I tell that like students are learning? One of the interesting things that I think I've noticed, and talking to faculty too, they always say things like, oh, I can sniff out AI language, like it's so obvious, terrible work and stuff. And maybe to a certain extent they can, but the thing about it is like, if you know how to use AI, like you can put out some pretty damn good work. The thing our students don't understand is how to effectively use AI. They don't have the subject matter expertise. They don't necessarily have those critical thinking skills that we've cultivated over many, many years. And so like their products are not necessarily as good. So what is it that we can offer them? We can offer them that way to using AI to basically be a maximum level professional in a way that maybe previously was a little bit more difficult. And at a time too, when AI is forcing like questions like, what is the point of college, right? Like, why don't we just like have AI taught classes, right? Why do we even need a degree? Why do we need to rely on higher education institutions? And these are real existential questions that are being asked, and I see them being asked in AI communities online all the time, right? Well, we don't need colleges anymore. Who wants to pay X thousand number of dollars, right? To like basically not learn what we need to learn. We cannot have it with AI because AI democratizes information. And so I think we, out of necessity, and maybe selfishly, have to also figure out like what it is that we're offering in terms of our product, right? And if we again, like students in the choir, essentially, like if we ignore AI, it's going to necessarily be at our peril. And so it's also a very good opportunity, granted, kind of forced, to better what it is that we do, and to also then survive in this future world that is full of uncertainty.
I think as it was said earlier, I think it's important for instructors to constantly remember that it's important to change. You cannot stay the same. The longer you're teaching, really, the more you have to change. I had one of our biology instructors that stated that, we went through, COVID-19, we had to change with it. Those that weren't teaching online had to quickly figure it out and do it, and no different than now with AI. And I appreciated her saying that because it's important to know that you cannot stay the same with your teaching, with your course materials. It has to change. And so to me, the best way is to attitude first, work on that attitude of wanting to embrace it, wanting to utilize it, learn about it, utilize it in the classroom because it's here. It's not going anywhere. And we owe it to our students to be able to get them ready as well. We know that the job market is very competitive. So nowadays to graduate students and they not know what to do with it or how to work with it, it's doing a disservice to them. So it's important for us as instructors to make sure we change, our course materials change, and then we equip the students to do the same.
It makes me wonder the extent to which the way a history professor is going to use these tools is going to be very different from the way a chemistry professor uses these tools, which is very different from business school, which is very different from music. So obviously the challenge from an institutional level is how do you create curriculum and upskilling workshops that recognize this reality while also not having 90 different workshops, right? Like, which is just not like feasible. One thing I keep kind of coming back to that AI is just like really fun. Like, and as much as fun can be objective, like it's objectively fun. Like if you get people steered in the right direction, the first time you start interacting with the chatbot and know a little bit what to do with it, it's fun making images on Stable Diffusion that are either awesome or like nightmare fuel, right? It's fun that, having it restructure a class that you actually know really well and you're like, oh, I never even thought about that, right? Like it's fun to tell it to like rewrite this in the language of Dorothy Parker or Ernest Hemingway, right? Like it's cool to do. Do you think that fun is a powerful asset that like, do you think that people who are AI focused on faculty upskilling for senior faculty and junior faculty, is the fun factor going to be a big part of how we succeed?
I think so. It makes a difference when you enjoy what you're doing. So to be able to learn about it and make it fun, I think that does nothing but help. You'll, I believe, always have some instructors that will, use it at a minimum, but then you've got others that are definitely overachievers and they'll use it all the time. But I believe as long as everybody is using it because it's needed, so since you have to use it, make it fun.
Sort of confession, I've always been team fun when it comes to teaching and learning. I think learning is a joy and I think it's a privilege, and I try to encourage my students in teaching them. I mean, granted, in very sort of narrow subject areas, like I do paleo and botany, which is the identification of plant remains, but I'm like, ooh, aside from these others, yeah, I do but the point is, in doing this, I'm like, there's applicability of this, even if none of you end up being archaeobotanists working at microscopes all day. Like, I'm teaching you the process of learning, of how to learn, right? And how to continue doing that. And that lifelong learning is not something we're just trying to cultivate in our students, but also in ourselves. And so, like, I think we also should sometimes relax a little bit and also remind ourselves of what it's like to be a student, and it's okay to be a student. I know many of us are socialized to like be experts and to maintain that, I would say veneer, but maintain the position of expertise and have people respect us for our knowledge base. But I think we should be more comfortable about admitting when we don't know things, but then because we are good learners, we are able to go out and find that information and adapt. And so I think reminding faculty of that is something that's worth doing, and also showing them, like, similar to how you're trying to encourage your students to have fun, like you also can have fun and enjoy this and also be a part of community. So I would say, like, post-pandemic, and this is across the board, I think, across many institutions, talking to different peers elsewhere, like, people feel lonely. We have a loneliness epidemic that everyone's talking about. Everyone's feeling disconnected despite being increasingly connected virtually. And so the opportunity to bring people together over a common issue has just been something I think a lot of people have been missing. And so to that comment about, disciplinary differences and whether or not, how do we address that with the trainings. So far, our trainings have been geared more towards like introductory level learners who have not engaged terribly much with AI. And I think, like, with the applications, there's a lot of commonalities that cross disciplines. So I know one of the joys for me, I've just been seeing, like, oh, like, how is a chemistry colleague using generative AI versus like a history colleague versus like an English professor. And some of this stuff I'm like, oh, I've never thought about things that way. I might be able to adapt that to my own work, which is, again, in very narrow and weird spaces. And at the same time, there is that opportunity also, I imagine, like, as we develop these workshops, to begin scaffolding learning so that, like, you increasingly create spaces also for perhaps more disciplinary or hyper-focused areas. Like, for example, there are disciplines that focus almost entirely on text, right? So text generation is going to be a big thing. And then there's, our artists and our other creators, and they may want to look at, like, tools to make music or tools to make art. We have people looking on, like, molecules and things, right? And they might want to explore applications of that, of generative AI to that, and coders and computer science, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, I don't want everyone to get siloed. I think one of the wonderful things about this moment has been that people are kind of branching out, reaching out, and talking to colleagues from all across the campus. And that's something that, like, I know we haven't had a lot of opportunity for unless you're already doing interdisciplinary work. And so I do think we need to maintain those spaces for people just to come together and just to enjoy dealing with different people with different backgrounds, different classes, and then getting inspired about how they can transform their own courses.
Just heads up, we have about 15 minutes.
Yeah. And so I think we're teaching Gen Z right now, 15 to 29-year-olds. Those are who we're teaching. And when they're asked what they want out of education, they want their education to be meaningful, relevant, and entertaining. And so, when I talk to faculty about that, they do, right? When we think about it, they've always had access. They didn't have to wait till Thanksgiving for Wizard of Oz to come on the TV, right? Anything they want to watch at any time is available to them all the time. So that is part of an expectation of this generation. So that's first. And I think as far as thinking about it cross-discipline, going back to that a little bit. One of the things we do is every semester for the last 3, we've invited 3 faculty members to come talk for 30 minutes each. What was your plan for using AI in your classroom? How was it going? And what would you do different next time? And tool 1, again, these are people in English and history, and computer science and nursing and pre-law. I'm trying to get everybody's talk. And they are really finding ways to make this fun because they're investigating it. They're co-learners with their students, which is by its very nature fun. That's all I'm saying.
I would say find a 6-year-old and show them ChatGPT and see what questions come out of their brain. I think there's something very playful and generative about these tools. My background is creative writing, so when these tools came out, I was actually teaching playwriting, like in writing. So we were using them to generate different types of dialogue based on changing the equation of the motivation or the subtext, the unstated reasons for wanting what the character wants. And it was really cool to see how tweaking little aspects of the formula resulted in very different dialogue. Also using Dorothy Parker is one of my favorite prompts for the AI. Shout out to Dorothy. But also when we were designing the class, that was a big key part of it. And Chandra Bowers and Ellie Braidwright and some of these folks from Auburn Online. It was really important to them to make sure that play was part of it. And there was no research on it yet. We've got to give them a way to learn. And one of the best ways to learn is to be in a situation where there's not really stakes. It's about generating ideas and creativity. So we have games in there like, which one of these was generated by an AI? So you have to kind of read, and we thought about pranking the faculty and having all of them or none of them, but there's one. Most people, interestingly, now almost everyone gets it right. When we first launched the course in March 2022, 23, fewer people got that right. So it's interesting to see through the play how skills are developing and how different aptitudes and competencies are coming out. But I think, essentially when we are expressing ourselves through language, we are already using algorithmic formulas to say things that are unique to us. I don't think there's anything different about AI from written language itself, the technology of grammar that didn't already exist. It just makes it a lot faster and a lot less interesting. And I think, for verbal text, it's pretty good. It's much better at playwriting than poetry, for example. But I think, as more of us are getting more used to the sound of these things, it gets boring at some point. And I think that's where we're seeing folks really kind of going back into their process and thinking about how does this tool support what I already do well, the critical thinking and things like that. So it's exciting to see how that more standardization is going to kind of play out in the way that we approach our work, our writing, our teaching, all those other communicative acts that we have to do in a public or transactional kind of way.
Thanks. Before we open up the Q&A, I just want to share that no one's in this room because they're like anti-AI, right? Is anyone here like from the Luddite faction? Like, is anybody that really like hang out afterwards and right? So like we've all used it, right? We're all here because we recognize the value of here. So it is kind of the room's kind of a bit of a bubble, right? Like, I mean that with the utmost respect. I think a good way to turn people off quickly is to position yourself as a kind of AI evangelist, right? If you walk in to give a keynote to skeptical faculty and you're like, hey, I was going to change your life. Immediately people are like, immediately, right? Like, I think that as a point of departure, I mean, like line 1, line 2, right after you introduce yourself to any kind of group that isn't like the group that's in this room, like validating, acknowledging skepticism, being like, hey, first and foremost, there are so many contexts in the classroom where AI has absolutely no place, right? Where it shouldn't be used, where old school critical thinking skills are essential. That's stuff we've been teaching for 100+ years. And AI can in a lot of ways get in the way of that. I think it establishes a degree of legitimacy and saying that, you're not an AI evangelist, you're an educator, and you're here to talk about what skepticism is very well founded and needs to be kept in check. And also the wonderful ways that these tools can be integrated, right? I find that that's a good way to kind of put guards down and then have people listen to what you're saying, starting from the negative. I came to AI, my area is the right to privacy. I'm a data privacy professional. Like AI is a privacy nightmare. And I started learning about it from a hyper negative space and then kind of came to it in a positive way. And I think that that's a journey that might not be intuitively where you want to start, but I found personally that it has a lot of success when I talk to people about it or approach it too. And so, starting from a negative space isn't actually always the worst approach when you're talking about this specific technology. And going too much on the fun and too much on the joy up front, on top of being hokey can also just immediately delegitimize, I think, where you're at. I don't know if that's been your experience, but it has been mine. A couple of things you said.
Literally start, how many of you think AI is a nightmare? We all raise our hands too, because honestly, we didn't ask for this.
Yes.
This is not that anyone wants it, but here we are, let's make the best. So I think acknowledging feelings is so important.
And that's just
Opportunity of learning that reading other people's work has. And I think with AI, you can infinitely create new drafts, new spins on drafts, building peer review into the classroom session itself. Have them bring their laptops, give them a printout, whatever, technology works for that. The more they are reading, the more they are seeing examples of how this stuff works, the more literate they're going to be both in AI, but also just in language itself. So that would be my main process activity I would suggest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, we're just gonna do one. Okay.
No, you absolutely. If you have something to share, please.
Yeah, so our pre-law instructor, right, he is leaning into this really heavily with his law students, pre-law students. And so what he's having them do is work with the AI kind of continuously, the whole class. It's 100% you working with AI in this area of looking at law and identifying its relevance, and then working with it as a partner. So even when students write something, they ask the AI for their feedback on it. And then when the AI gives them something, they do feedback on it. So it's a back and forth. So it's teaching the students to partner with the AI in the class. And that's the whole basis of, like, this is the deep end of the pool kind of a class. And you can imagine, I think about it now as I hear people like Ruben Place speak about it in medicine, right? So you were talking about it curing us. It really isn't about curative. It's about diagnostics, right? I mean, you want it reading your radiography. It's better than people. It's never hungry. It's never tired. It's never trying to get home to its kids after school. And so it is better. So anyway, I hope that answered.
So my question is, what is the plan of Video Center to help train Auburn University faculty so that we become comfortable using AI in our teaching effective way and communicate with our students? Thank you.
We can go deep into this later, Chatham, but I mean, the goal is really to get everybody in a department meeting, talking with their colleagues who are also teaching the classes within their department. I think that's the big step we're focusing on now. Shout out to Jenny, what can I do? But going into department meetings, embedding for 15 minutes, just a little snippet, and very slowly kind of moving the community of practitioners forward rather than just, we've got training, come and get it, so I think that's our next step.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a librarian, I work here at Auburn, and ChatGPT I was understruck by how incompetent it was finding citations, and I really was, and I've now seen that Scopus and Web of Science now have AI enablers, which do a very good job of acting as finding aids, and I was wondering, what is your experience been with finding, with using generative AI to find articles to support writing? Because I've seen it at both ends. I've seen in the past, since August of this year, Scopus and Web Science are very good AI assistants, but I want to know what other alternatives are out there.
So I'll just speak to those with ChatGPT being terrible as a research tool. I think it's pretty good for like summarizing like certain areas of study. So if you want a quick sort of idea of like, tell me about like, something 19th century practices when it came to, domesticity in the household, something like that. Like it does a pretty good job of giving you an overview what's happening. When you ask it to like cite its sources, that's when things get a little bit dicey. And in trying to use it for like my own purposes for research, like it's been completely terrible. And also it has a tendency to confabulate and hallucinate quite a bit to the point of like it will maintain that it's absolutely right in terms of like this citation exists and all this stuff. It's kind of scary because it makes it look legitimate. And this is what I tell the students, I'm like, this looks real. Like unless you knew, and I know this literature, so I know that that's like made up. You might actually like position that as fact, right? You might cite it, and then like if you're God forbid in the real world where like that really matters, like in a legal case, like you will get in trouble, right? So like you know, there has to be again, like Lawrence was saying, just like tempering the optimism and promise of AI. There has to be a good understanding of how these tools are trained, what they're capable of, and what also they are lacking. And we're seeing also in this time of like basically it's a technological revolution, everyone's racing to create the next best thing that like we don't know for sure like what's good for what yet. We're doing this type of work right now, just keeping track of development, which is going at such a quick pace, and the number of tools that have arisen, and even within the ChatGPT ecosystem, I mean, there's a bunch of custom GPTs that are supposed to be better at certain tasks and things like that. And so like just experimenting with them can be very overwhelming. I do know that there are certain AI tools that are better for scholarship and research. I haven't personally experimented too much with them, but I know that there's like companies out there trying to essentially move away from more generalist approaches to more like specific tasks and functions. So I think we are going to begin to see that. And I think the difficulty for institutions in terms of licensing is like realizing like how to offer that capacity and support when at a time we don't know like what's going to be the next like Google, right? Or Microsoft, like who's going to emerge from the landscape. And so what's helpful though is to like have communities where we can ask each other, like, hey, do you find a good research tool that's able to like, you know, scour the available literature out there so that we can find good citations related to X topic. Because unfortunately, like with ChatGPT right now, it just simply isn't the best for that. And like, you know, Lindsay, you were saying, like, even with writing, like it's good for certain things. Like I know for grant writing, it's so good for grant writing because grant writing is extremely formulaic and boring. And you know, it's just like it's the creative, right? Again, the human aspect, the creativity, right? And that's where you can kind of come in as the expert and make things better. And so I think we just have to keep our lines of communication open and that the developed communities where you can rely on each other for finding out like what their needs and things is for certain tasks or needs.
Outside of the stream, these good people.
Yeah, no,
So I can forward as a faculty member at the University of Alabama, it is very difficult for me to say nice things about it. It was about a year ago when we started thinking really deeply about faculty upskilling, how to teach AI at a level to fellow educators. The Digital Center was very gracious in hosting us, having changed ideas, hopefully things like that. So personally, that we just wow and over and be classy and say thank you. Operation Roll Eagle, yeah. Our esteemed panel, thank you so much for everything.